of a view from space with a tribute to the spaceman. This is 2017, 11/11. Let's listen up.
By the way, I get them, and I thank you for them. Thanks so much for yours, the one you sent tonight. So, Merovingians, very clever. This is the bloodline of Cain, by the way, who supposedly have the blood of the house of David in their veins from Jesus Christ mating with Mary Magdalene. So the Merovingians of ancient Egypt had assured the continuity of Egyptian error when they... Well, Gibson, as I said before the break, hits the nail on the head when he wrote, "The swarms of monks arose from the Nile in Egypt, overspread and darkened the Christian world." So you know what he meant. Athanasius is known as the father of orthodoxy too, by the way, and the theological center of the Nicene age. As the famous opponent of the Arian heresy, Athanasius valiantly defended the divinity of Christ, but he also taught that the incarnation of the word divinized human flesh made it possible for men to become gods. Did you hear me? Because that is key to the new world order. It is possible, he said, for men to become gods. God became a man that men might become gods, wrote Athanasius, as a matter of fact. Arianism was condemned, and Arius, who was a Jew, was excommunicated at the Council of Nicaea in 321 AD. The Council of Nicaea, by the way, actually picked all of the scriptures that would go into the Bible and left others out. Although Athanasius led the bishops to contend for the faith as to the person of Jesus Christ, it was at this ecumenical council, the Council of Nicaea, that celibacy became a requirement for Roman Catholic leaders, as stated in the Catholic Encyclopedia itself. Other traditions of the Roman Catholic Church were adopted from Egyptian monasticism too, under the leadership of Athanasius. Who else? For instance, virgins were now seen as exclusively as the bride of Christ. The deification of virgins led to the Blessed Virgin Mary too. Virgin Mary becomes then the model for all virgins. Convents are established to teach. Vows of silence are then introduced because of Athanasius. Formal vow of celibacy is also introduced at that time. Inheritances are all given to whom? The Roman Catholic Church. Law. Pilgrimages to the Holy Land, promoted, venerated sacred sites and mystical caves were also promoted. Bishops, priests were earthly representatives of virgins, heavenly bridegroom. It was said, written in the law of the church. Monks began to be appointed as bishops, establishing monastic communities as part of the church under the authority of bishops. It was conceivable that the Council of Nicaea, who picked all the scriptures that went into the Bible, later ecumenical councils, and the controversies leading to them were part of the process to remove Christianity from its scripture base, introduce a lie to challenge another lie. The Nestorian controversy revolved around the question of whether Mary was the mother of God or not, or the mother of Christ, as stated by Nestorius. At the Council of Ephesus, 431 AD, Nestorius was condemned and Mary was declared to be the mother of God. By the way, you may not be aware of this, but Ephesus was a center of goddess worship where the Essenes established their school. The first known Illuminati order, it was called Ulambrado, was founded the same year that Columbus supposedly discovers the Americas, 1492. It was founded by Spanish Kabbalists called, sometime back in the show, I talked about that. You would have to understand what that is. A secret organization of people that were sworn to follow Mosaic law. With violent persecution in Spain and Portugal beginning in 1391, hundreds of thousands of Jews, you see, had been forced to convert to the faith of the Roman Catholic Church. Publicly, they were now Roman Catholics, but secretly, they practiced the Kabbalah. The Marranos were able to teach their children secretly. After 1540, a lot of those Marranos opted to flee to England, Holland, France, the Ottoman Empire, Turkey, Brazil, and other places in South and Central America. The Marranos kept strong family ties. And when they became very wealthy and influential in the nations where they lived, they had it as a custom for all Jewish people. It didn't matter in what nation they lived. Their loyalty was not to that country at all, but to themselves and to keeping the Mosaic law. It's how the world government rules nations to this day. In 1492, Spanish Roman Catholics also expelled the last of the Muslims and Jews from Spain. The reason for the Spanish Inquisition, of course, buried under a mile-high pile of propaganda, demonstrating against the anti-Semitism of the church. From 1000 to 1200 AD, the magically mystical system known as the Kabbalah, black magic power from Enoch himself, was developed mainly by African Jews, shepherding Jews, they're called, especially in Spain. The Inquisition was not directed against the Jews for practicing the Torah Judaism, but for criminal activities connected with the Talmud and Kabbalah. Even ritual human sacrifice was performed. Tantric sex magic was performed, for the Talmud directs Jews to exterminate Christians wherever they are finding them, and the Kabbalah contains erotic elements too. That's the Book of Enoch. Also in 1492, Christopher Columbus was funded by Kabbalists to explore the New World in search of a homeland for their persecuted brethren. August 2nd, the Druid feast by the way of Lunasa. In 1492, Christopher Columbus set sail for the New World. Sponsored by the Grand Master of the Priory of Sion, Leonardo da Vinci, and funded by the wealthy Merovingian families in Italy of the last name Medici, who had placed their family members as kings and queens and popes. According to a cult conspiracy by Michael Howard, Columbus was association with a political group that supported the ideas of Dante, one of the alleged Grand Masters of the Order of the Rosy Cross, who's known to have used codes and ciphers in his writings, and a practice associated with membership of a secret society. Columbus' voyages of discovery were actually sponsored by Leonardo da Vinci and Lorenzo de Medici, both initiates of secret societies, who founded the explorer wealthy patrons among European royalty and aristocracy. So there's also speculation that Leonardo da Vinci was a part of the Jewish bloodlines too. They tried tribe of Dan. The nobility of a talented bastard, Leonardo, such was the caption of an article in the important Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera of October 1st of 2000. Yeah, just recently. Because you see, recent research maintains that the maestro of Vinci was born of a Jewess who came from Russia. Leonardo da Vinci's mother, a Russian Jewish woman. And so there's also evidence that Christopher Columbus was a Kabbalist. The Jewish scholar Eliezer Segal cites Columbus's biographer, Samuel de Nagaria, that the Jewish historian Cecil Roth was providing the most compelling arguments in favor of this view. He wrote this: "There's been some weighty scholars debate over the possibility that Columbus, through undeniably devout and zealous Catholic faith, might also have been the proud descendant of Spanish Kabbalists. Ironically, this view has been championed by some patriotic Spaniards who would rather have him a Spanish Jew than an Italian Gentile. So you see, there's evidence that Columbus spoke Spanish while still living in Italy. An unusual situation, you'd have to understand, unless his family originated in Spain. There were many Spanish-speaking Jewish refugees from the Inquisition, though, in the Genoa area. The name Colon, which Columbus adopted as the Spanish equivalent of his last name, was not the expected form, which would have been Colon or Colombo. It was a Jewish variation of the name. Columbus was known to frequent a community of Jews and former Jews, among whom were some noted astronomers, navigators, as well as the official translator. Maranos figure prominently, of course, among Columbus's backers and the crew on that voyage. Throughout his life, he demonstrated a keen knowledge of the Bible and the geography of the Holy Land. In fact, in one place, he calculates the date exactly from the destruction of the second house, the Temple of Solomon, counting from the traditional Jewish date of 68 AD rather than the generally accepted 70th AD year. Now, the connections between the timing of Columbus's voyage to discover America and the expulsion of Spanish Jewry are indeed very, very curious. That's next when I come back on Talk Radio AM 640. It's AVFS. I'm a spaceman. More coming right up. I'm the guy to call a spaceman. It's Talk Radio AM 640. Please direct your emails to spaceman@640toronto.com or space@640toronto.com. Thanks for that one you sent. Here's an example of how science and lying wonders are able to deceive religious masses. Even though the miracle worker has flagrantly denied the faith, violated the trust of his followers, exhibited a reprobate character. Moral liberation is often the rallying call of false prophets, isn't it? The foremost prophet of anti-humanism being Aleister Crowley, the occultist whose book of law codified the moral values of the occult by reducing them to a single commandment. The only rule you have to live this life: do what you will be the whole of the law. In other words, man is God, your God, in your own life. What is right for you, no other man can intercede and say, no, that's wrong. You can't do that. No, you can do what you want, what you will. There was a Jewish person, a rabbi named Zabbatai Tzvi. He was also a prototype of the Antichrist, who will be a vile person, as recorded in Dan, chapter 11, verse 21, and a practitioner of black magic, Kabbalist magic from the book of Enoch, and whose miracles will deceive the Jews with even greater success when he does come. So this coming Antichrist will be an adept in the occult traditions, possessing hidden knowledge, gnosis, and all the power of Satan for his supernatural displays of witchcraft. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, the King James Version of the Bible states, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences, understanding the occult ways, shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, but he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper in practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And through his policy also he shall cause witchcraft, to prosper in his hand, black magic, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. Daniel 8, verses 23 through 25. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were as the feet of a bear. His mouth is the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. That famous quote from Revelation 13, verse 2, King James Version of the Bible. In order for you to understand what events that happen, that they don't just happen. The Illuminati order was not invented by Adam Weishaupt, but rather renewed and reformed. As I spoke about earlier in the show, the first known Illuminator order, the Ulimbrado, was founded in 1492 by Spanish Jews called the Moranos, as I was saying. They were also known as crypto Jews. In 1491, San Ignacio de Loyola was born in the Basque province of Chicozo in Spain. His parents were Moranos, and at the time of his birth, the family was very wealthy. As a young man, he became a member of the Jewish Illuminati order in Spain. And as a cover for his crypto-Jewish activities, his secret cultist activities, he became very active as a Roman Catholic. In 1539, he moved to Rome, where he founded the Jesuit order. Yes, the Jesuit Adam Weishaupt and 17 Jacob Frank Tzvi, both having established viable subversive movements, were at that point. If they had not been bankrolled by another Kabbalist Jew, where Ansel Rothschild in that particular instance, toward the end of subverting traditional Judaism as well as Christianity, it would never have happened. But it did. The Jewish Kabbalistic leaders were able to establish control over all world banking through the Rothschild family. And the political power was captured through the work of Adam Weishaupt. Here's how it was done. Mayor Amschel, Rothschild, a rabbinical trained German Jew who later took the name Rothschild, was firmly established in the German city Frankfurt on Main. with an emerging banking houses early as 1764. The leader of the Kabbalah at that time, Jacob Frank, a Polish-born Jew, by the way, in the family of Leibowitz, lived in the German city of Offenbach, just south of the city of Frankfurt, from 1773. Johann Adam Weishaupt, founder of the Illuminati, the original one, from a Jewish family also that converted to the Roman Catholic Church, a Kabbalist, of course, was at Ingolstadt in 1770, a German city in Bavaria. With these three men, the stage was set to ignite a hellfire that would forever bring changes to this world you and I live in today. And those changes are still going on because that plan is almost come to fruition. This one world government. At this point in time, it's not known who supervised these three Jewish men, but it's obvious that someone directed their efforts. May 1st, 1776, just a couple of months before the Declaration of Independence in America. The Order of the Illuminati was founded by Adam Weishaupt. At this time, Weishaupt was only 28 years old. Amschel Rothschild was 32. Frank was, I believe, 50 years old. Then Amschel financed Adam Weishaupt, and Jacob Frank laid the Kabbalistic theological foundation for the Order of the Illuminati. I believe that the head of all secret societies directing this evil triumvirate from behind the scenes was actually the Priory of Sion. Just as presently the secret societies are organized and still are, and work in harmony under the direction of the High Cabal. Before this, his incarnation in a federal incarceration rather, Fritz Springmeier wrote in the Top 13 Illuminati Bloodlines book, The Prior of the Sion. The Elders of Sion also relates to the Rothschilds, by the way, who are reported to serve on a Jewish Council of Elders of Sion. Springmeier referenced George Armstrong's book, The Rothschild Money Trust, which states that that is the present objective of Jeroboam Rothschild and his secret 300 Elders of Sion. And according to Eric Samuelson, Jeroboam Rothschild represented France as the in the Paris Peace Conference in 1919 under a Gentile surname. Also located in Paris was the Priory of Sion, by the way. Beer was the American expert in colonial questions at the Peace Conference in Paris with Lord Eustache Percy. He drew up a plan for the history of the Peace Conference, which was carried out by Harold Tepperley. The British Round Table Group served at the conference as advisors to Prime Minister David Lloyd George in those times. The real behind-the-scene experts at the Paris conference included Michael George Mandel, real name Jeroboam Rothschild. Philip Sassoon was there, and Bernard Baruch. Beer was also named as head of the Mandate Department of the League of Nations as soon as it was established. And the mystery man was George Louis Beer. In 1776, Mayor Amschel Rothschild would have been the kingpin of the Priory of Sion, even though he's not listed as the Grand Master. And he is never mentioned in the books exposing the Priory of Sion, such as Holy Blood, Holy Grail, for example. The Messianic legacy, which the authors promote as meticulously researched, the Priory of Sion, or the Priory of Zion, is no doubt a religious front for the learned Elders of Zion, the High Cabal of the International Jewry, responsible for the Protocols of Zion, a strategy for world domination. Because you see, it's through action on Israel that this new world order is going to arise. Adam Weishaupt said of the Illuminati, another front of the learned elders of Zion, as in the spiritual orders of the Roman Catholic Church religion, was only a pretense. So must our order, he said, also in a nobler way try to conceal itself, hide itself behind a learned society or something of that kind. So anyone who has read the protocols of the learned elders of Zion can actually discern the Rothschild plan and modus operandi for world conquest. After all, we just celebrated the 100th anniversary of Lord Balfour writing his 58-word letter to Lionel Rothschild, outlining the way to be able to create Israel, which they did in 1948. It's Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. More next. Please send me your emails, if you care to space at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com. So anybody at all who's actually taken the time to read the protocols of the learned elders of Zion can quickly understand that the Rothschild plan and modus operandi for world conquest is right there, all there. Protocol number 5, section 4, bears an uncanny resemblance to the Illuminati plan to secretly direct the Jesuits from behind the scenes while discrediting the so-called Society of Jesus as a Roman Catholic Gentile organization. The same dialectical tactic is in use today. What's more, the art of directing masses and individuals by means of cleverly manipulated theory and verbiage by regulations of life in common with and all sorts of other quirks, in all which the goyim understand nothing, belongs likewise to the specialists of our administrative brain, reared on analysis, on observation, on delicacies of fine calculation. In this species of skill, we have no rivals at all, any more than we have either in the drawing up of the plans of political actions and solidarity. In this way, the Jesuits alone might have compared with us, he says, but we have contrived to discredit them in the eyes of the unthinking mob as an overt organization, while we ourselves, all the while, have kept ourselves a secret organization in the shade. But it's probably all the same to the world who's its sovereign lord, whether the head of the Catholic Church or our despot of the blood of Zion. But to us, the chosen people, is very far from being a matter of indifference. The House of Rothschild, you see, is acknowledged to be the hidden hand behind the protocols of Zion, the Illuminati and the Order of the Priory of Zion. Rothschild is an eponym for Ruth's child, referring to Ruth, of course, in the lineage of David and Solomon, the House of David. A bloodline of which the Antichrist will come. In the Old Testament, Ruth, the Moabite widow, marries Boaz and gave birth to Obed, who became the grandfather of David. In Merovingian lore and Freemasonry, which would be the Windsors today, the titular head of that line, the son of the widow is the descendant of Ruth, who is believed to be the Messiah. Judeo-Freemasonry, in fact, teaches that Solomon was the Messiah. The lion that guarded the ark and held in his mouth the key wherewith to open it figuratively represents Solomon, the lion of the triad of tribe of Judah, who preserved and communicated the key to the true knowledge of God, of his laws, and of the profound mysteries in the moral and physical universe. The lion, Arai, as he's known, or Araya, which means the altar, still holds in his mouth the key of the enigma of the Sphinx. That's written in Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma book. The Freemason. The 121 elders and the Priory of Zion appear to be the overlords of the B'nai B'rith organization of today, which means Sons of the Covenant, by the way. According to well-informed sources, there is in the B'nai B'rith a superposition of secret societies ending in a single governing power. Above the B'nai B'rith are the B'nai Mosh, then the B'nai Zion, and finally the hidden center of the Supreme Command. Layer after layer of secrecy. The secret powers behind New World Order. So, returning to Deutsche Devils, although Barry Shamus exposes the Sabbateans and Frankists, he takes the perspective of the Jesuits were not a Gentile organization, but Jewish from the start. You have to look at, and keep this in mind, that Shemish is actually himself a Zionist who rejects not the Jewish state, but merely the secular leftist association of labor Zionism. The Israeli journalist is in favor of a religious or right-wing Zionism, which is more devoted to military expansion of the state of Israel. So, we continue in Deutsche Devils with the Zionist movement and the final act in the destruction of Judaism by the High Cabal. It was written this way. It was from Germany to London. Frederick Engels were sent to devise the rot of communism. Shortly after that task was done, the Rothschilds sent their agents, John Jacob Astor.
Remember, people, forgery means it's a copy of something, a copy of the real thing.
And Jacob Schiff from Germany to America. They financed the robber barons like the Rockefellers, J.P. Morgan, who in 1922 founded the Council of Foreign Relations, by the way, to overthrow the American Constitution and switch the nation's diplomacy to the Illuminati control. In 1932, how many organizations in Germany represented German Jewry? Over 250. In 1933, how many? One. And one only. Labor Zionism, it was called. First, Rabbi Edelman's account continued. To corrupt the Jews, the Frankists adopted at first a humane policy of sorts. With Rothschild money, Jesuit power, the so-called Enlightenment was initiated by the German Jewish apostate Moses Mendelssohn. Napoleon was financed to liberate the Jews wherever he conquered, and from Germany. The reform and conservative movements were financed to further dilute the faith and introduce totally foreign concepts to their congregations. But the pace wasn't fast enough. The ornery Jews just weren't cooperating with evil. So those stubbornly accepting Torah morality would have to be removed and permanently, and only those practicing Shabbatanianism would be permitted to survive. The Illuminati's view of an Israel. Yes, in the 2,000 years of European Jewish history, there were pogroms, crusades, inquisitions. The Inquisitions, aided and abetted by the Jesuits, but compared to what happened from the 1880s on, life was a pretty tolerable affair. The turning point in the final war, though, against the Jews was the founding of Zionism by the Shabbatanians. The final aim of the movement was to establish a Shabbatanian state in the historical land of the Jews, thus taking over Judaism for good. To foment that idea, life had to be made so intolerable for Europe's Jews that escape to Palestine would appear to be the best option. The Cossack programs were the first shot in this campaign, and for them, the Frankists turned to the Jesuits and their influence over the Catholic Church. So the Jesuits have done more to spread communism, beginning with their feudal communes in South America, and now they wanted to punish the anti-papists, the anti-Catholics of Europe by imprisoning them behind bars. The deal was simple. The Jesuits provided the programs. The Frankists, the communists, and naturally, the Rothschild would provide the money. Incredibly, the Zionists controlled the refugee policy, so that only politically minded Zionist Jews were permitted to emigrate to Israel. Trapped in Nazi-occupied territories were those religious Jews who opposed the Zionist movement. All neatly set up, weren't they? Many for the biblical reason that the Messianic kingdom would not be established until the Messiah himself arrived. Jews against Zionism were represented by an organization called the Ugaz Israel, which was founded in 1912, but sold out to the Zionists and was superseded by a splinter organization. Natirai Karta was his name, founded in Jerusalem in 1938. Compounded the tragedy of the Holocaust was the fact that many countries, including most of the Allied nations, closed their borders to Jewish immigration, wouldn't let them in. In his book, The Six-Pointed Star, O.J. Graham elucidated the selective policy of those Zionists in those days. So from records, it seems that from 1933 to 1939, the Jews were expected to leave Germany and all Nazi-occupied territories. It was, at the same time, it was a very different selection system and a very restricted immigration policy on who went where. Who went to Palestine? Headed by the Zionists. It's the Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. More coming right up after this. I'm the guy that calls Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Please direct your emails to spaceman640toronto.com. One address, the other space at 640toronto.com. By the way, I get them if you send them from either of those two. And I thank you so much for the one you sent. So, as I was saying before the break, from 1933 to 1939, Jews in Germany were expected to leave Germany and all Nazi-occupied territories, but at the same time, there was a definite selection system, very restrictive immigration policy on who went to Palestine. It was headed by the Zionists, which is headed by the Rothschilds. And it was Lionel Rothschild that actually established the state, gave them their flag, the six-pointed star, the hexagram, which is today's Israeli flag. and put that land there and those people back there and called it Israel to draw in the ire of the surrounding area and to make it a sore spot, a festering area, which would eventually draw all the world's armies into a war. And they're about to get there to do it again. The very same ones that put Israel on the map in 1948. Lord Balfour, I recall speaking not long ago on this show about writing Lionel Rothschild 58 words. They had been 13, get it? To create an Israel.
So may we always remember that the Bolshevik Revolution killed 60 million Christian Russians. May we never forget.
In Palestine. And now they're going to do the same trick again and create a Palestine in an Israel. Lucy Dewitowitz, in her book, The War Against Jews, had this say at their 18th Congress in 1933. The Zionists established within the Jewish Agency for Palestine a central bureau for the settlement of German Jews, which, to begin with, excluded anti-Zionists as applicants for certificates. Young people in good health with some training for agricultural work or manual trades, and persons with capital were the preferred candidates only for Aliyah in a process where the needs and interests of Palestine took precedence over the strategy of rescue of the people from the clutch of Hitler. Nathan Birnbaum was an early Zionist. In fact, he was the one who coined the phrase Zionism. It also represents counsel at the First Congress of Basel. Birnbaum left the movement in 1899, became completely orthodox and absolutely hostile to this Zionist movement headed by the Rothschilds, backed by the British monarchy. In his paper titled Bondage to Our Fellow Jew, he wrote this: "It seems that we're better qualified for our bondage to the Gentiles than with our bondage to our brothers," meaning the Rothschilds and their ilk, who are estranged from the Torah and its teachings because they were into the Kabbalah. When our own estranged brothers, who next to us are the near grain, not only persecute us, but themselves give a handle to our persecution, when they not only meddle in our affairs, but take them wholly out of our hands. When they do not only refuse to let us go our ways in peace, but actually try to obstruct our road forever. Birnbaum wrote those words in 1901. It's still going on today. Michael Zeltzer, in his book Zionism Reconsidered, says not even the events of 1933 aroused their political interest. He refers, of course, to the Zionist organization. They were naive enough to see them as a God-sent opportunity for an undreamt of wave of immigration to Palestine. When the Zionist organization, against the natural impulses of the Jewish people, decided to do business with Hitler, to trade German goods against the wealth of German Jewry, to flood the Palestine market with German products, and thus make a mockery of the boycott against German-made articles, they found little opposition with the Jewish national homeland, and at least all among its aristocracy the so-called kibbutz, as they were called. How did Jews even know those facts? Another eye-opener is evidence that Adolf Hitler was not only Jewish himself, but the greatest grandson of a Rothschild. During World War II, a psychological analysis of Adolf Hitler, his life and legend, published by Walt Langer of the U.S. Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, forerunner of the Secret Service, as an attempt to screen the wealth of contradictory, conflicting, and unreliable material, as he called it, concerning Hitler, into strata, which would be helpful to the policymakers and those who wish to frame a counter-propaganda. Or to use Langer's words, how did a crazy paper hanger manage, in the course of a relatively few years, to talk his way into the highest political offices, hoodwink the experienced leaders of the major powers, turn millions of highly civilized people into barbarians, then order the extermination of a large segment of the population, then build and control the mightiest war machine ever known, and plunge the world into history's most devastating war? The only explanation could be that Hitler had family connections in high places. And wouldn't you agree? You know who Adolf's father was? Adolf Hitler. He was the legitimate son of Maria Anna Schicklgruber. And it's generally thought that the father of Adolf Hitler would be Adolf's grandfather, Johann George Heidler, a miller's assistant. Adolf, however, was not legitimized, bore his mother's name, in fact, until he was 40 years of age when he changed it to Hitler. They're covering up lineage here. Names, always, by the elite rich, are changed to hide the real truth. There are even some people who seriously doubt that Johann George Heidler was the father of Adolf. Thiessen and Kohler, for example, claim that Chancellor Dollfuss had ordered the Austrian police to conduct a thorough investigation into the Hitler family. As a result of this investigation, a secret document was actually prepared which proved that Marina Anna Schicklgruber was living in Vienna at the time she conceived Adolf Hitler. At that time, she was employed as a servant in the home of Baron Rothschild. As soon as the family discovered her pregnancy, when the Rothschilds discovered that one of their maids was pregnant, she was sent back to her home in Spital, where Adolf was born. If this is true, that one of the Rothschilds is the real father of Adolf Hitler, Adolf's father, it would make Adolf a quarter Jew. And according to these sources, Adolf Hitler knew of the existence of this document and the incriminating evidence it contained. So, in order to obtain it, it precipitated events in Austria and initiated the assassination of Dollfuss. According to this story, he failed to obtain the document at that time since Dollfuss had secreted it away and had told a man called Schuschnigg of its whereabouts so that in the events of his death, the independence of Austria would remain assured. Several stories of this general type are still in circulation today. It's the Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. More right after this. We got to call the Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Communicate by email only. No website. No Twitter account. No Facebook page. Space at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com. So, how about this? How Hitler's father, born in 1837, in the period when Solomon Mayer Rothschild was the only Rothschild to live in the Vienna mansion. Even his wife didn't live there because their marriage was so bad that she stayed in Frankfurt. Their son, Anselm Solomon, spent most of his working life in Paris, too, in Frankfurt, away from the Vienna home of his father. So Father Solomon Mayer Rothschild, living alone in Vienna, in a mansion where Hitler's grandmother worked, is the prime, most obvious candidate. And Hermann von Goldschmidt, the son of Solomon Mayer Rothschild's senior clerk, wrote a book, published it in 1917. He said this in that book of Solomon. By the 1840s, he had developed a somewhat reckless enthusiasm for young girls, and he had a lecherous passion for very young girls, his adventures with whom had to be hushed by the police at times. And Hitler's grandmother, a young girl, working under the same roof, would not have been the subject of Solomon's desire. And this same girl became pregnant while working there. And her grandson becomes the Chancellor of Germany, funded by the Rothschilds. And he starts the Second World War, which is so vital to the Rothschild Illuminati agenda. It will take 3 world wars, remember, to create the one world government. After the First World War, there was only 43 nations in the League of Nations, it was called. After World War II, it morphed into what we have today, the United Nations, and 193 countries involved. The Illuminati agenda. And the Illuminati are obsessed with putting their bloodlines into power on all sides of a conflict. That's how you control both sides. And the Rothschilds are one of their most key bloodlines. Is all this coincidence? Here's another coincidence for you then. Nikki Hilton, just a couple of years ago, married the latest heir to this Rothschild fortune, James Rothschild. Where did they get married? At the home of Prince William and Duchess Kate Middleton, Kensington Palace, where Princess Diana lived, the new home of William and Kate. They were guests, Nikki Hilton and the bridegroom, James Rothschild. Altogether, when you put Conrad Hilton's fortune together, along with the Rothschild fortune, you come up with they're worth about $700 trillion. Got married in the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge's house, Kensington Palace. Bloodline members, I tell you. So, one thing is certain. Without Hitler, there would be no state of Israel today. I believe they're going to do the opposite again, the mirror image, just as in the occult of those occultist black magic practitioners, the spirit world and the physical world mirroring one another. I believe they're going to do it again with the state of Israel, as they make room for a new country called Israel in the middle of Palestine in 1948. They're going to make a new state of Palestine, where Israel is, for the two-state solution which will send the world into World War III. Just how? I believe Hezbollah or Hamas, once the Jews sit down and negotiate the treaty, which will be for 7 years, Hamas or Hezbollah, after Palestine has given their land, has their own country, the two-state solution is in place. The Palestinians are moving back into their land again. Hezbollah or Hamas will attack Israel, and Israel will say, "We knew it all along. You just wanted to wipe us off the map and take our land, annihilate us." So they do a preemptive strike on Palestine, where all of the Palestinians have been lured back into one area and attacked by Israel, which will, well, leave the world aghast. And then they'll all turn on Israel for what they have done. Then we'll start World War III. That's how I believe this is to play out. Now, returning to the German triumvirate, which set the stage for the Holocaust, whatever became of the multitudes of Sabbatean and Frankist families who converted from Judaism to Catholicism in the 17th and 18th centuries? Well, when you consider that America was a sanctuary for European crypto Jews, remember I told you about those words, following Mosaic law in secret, it was no surprise that soon the Frankists would turn up in the U.S. and land jobs in where? The highest levels of government, the highest levels of financial institutions, which then became the servants of the international Kabbalists and the Rothschilds and the elite Illuminati. Mary Shamish reveals just a few. A quote from Jerry Reba. Frankist families, both those living as Christians and those living as Jews, tried to marry only among themselves. In the summers, the German groups regularly held secret meetings in the resort of Karlsbad. It's said by the middle of the 19th century, the majority, really, of the lawyers in Prague and Warsaw were from these Frankist families. The United States Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter was reported to have received a copy of Eva Frank's portrait from his mother, a descendant of the Prague Frankist family. So as you can see, there's a migration to all the places where they set up business, you could say. Here's a quote from Frankfurter. "The real rulers in Washington are invisible and exercise their power from behind the scenes." That's a justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, a former justice of the Supreme Court. The difference between Rabbo and Rabbi Adelman is that Adelman proves that literally all of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's court judges were German-descended Sabbateans, determined to purge Jewry of its unnecessary European, non-Sabbatean morality-believing cohorts. A short list. Felix Brandes.
So we're going to pause there. We're going to get back into it for the last half hour of 2017, 11/11. You can all see how this is priceless and timeless info of having to do with what's going on right now with Palestine and with the rest of the world. Iran being bombed and stuff. We all know who's in control. Spaceman 2.0, out.